Healthcare and senior care is fraught with problems and challenges, but we're also seeing some amazing new clinical treatments and resources. This show will help illuminate and uncover the good, bad, the ugly in order to equip patients, families, and other healthcare providers. Welcome to Senior Care Confidential. Hi, welcome to Senior Care Confidential. I'm Brian Harmon. Joining with me today is Liz James, a reformed pharmacist whose own health struggles caused her to question her training and experience. And since then, she started a company to combat misinformation and promote proper health through nutrition and avoidance of certain harmful medications. Well, welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So how did you get started in, first off, give me a background in terms of pharmacy, and then what caused you to lead down a different path?
So I've been a pharmacist for 32 years now. In September of 2020 was my official walk away after 30 years in practice.
Okay.
And but the first 10 years of my practice, I would say I was very much a traditional pharmacist, believed all the Kool-Aid that we were fed in pharmacy school. And then I had a little accident, and I was about 33 years old, and I had broken my wrist. Found out I was osteopenic at the time. And
at 33?
At 33, that's
Wow.
very young, but I'm fine boned, you know. And at that time, the doctor was like, you need to go ahead and start thinking about getting on some basic medication. And I was like, oh no,
Wow.
oh no. And so I was at work, had my wrist in a cast, and on two separate occasions, I had two different women come up and say, you need to drink raw milk for that broken bone. And the first one, I was like, raw milk is dangerous.
And I've heard about this. Conspiracy theorists.
Yeah. It's like, that's really dangerous. You're going to end up with like TB or something, you know? So then the second one, it was like a few weeks later, a different lady came up and said the same thing. And yeah, I am faith-based. And I was like, when you hear two things kind of out of the blue like that, I feel like that's the Holy Spirit saying, you need to take a look at this. Yeah. And so I went home that night and I started just doing a little bit of research online. And I ended up ordering a book called The Untold Story of Milk by Ron Schmid. And it's really a textbook. I mean, so it's not a quick read. But I got done with that book and I was like, my word. They have not been telling us the truth. Yeah. and it was fascinating. I mean, and I feel like people cannot understand things unless you also understand the history behind how we got to where we are now.
Sure. Yep.
And that's exactly the same. That's exactly what happened in the raw milk industry, or the milk industry in general. And so you want to cover that right now?
Maybe? We can, or you can skip forward to let's do this. How did it help you first? Like, what was the results after you started taking raw milk?
The fast forward result is, I started drinking raw milk, and we found our source, started drinking raw milk. After about 6 years, we ended up buying our own cows because we do live on a farm. And then I started hand milking, and it evolved from there.
What did your lab values show once you started doing the raw milk? Did it correct the osteopenia?
Well, so what happened was I was 33 when I was 48. So that was 15 years later, right? Then I had a little run-in with a bull. Yeah, you and I have talked about this, but I'll explain. I got charged by a bull. And he did.
This isn't like you're running with a bull thing. This is like a bull at your own house.
Yeah, this is like a bull.
So he knew you.
Yes, yes. He knew me, but he wasn't happy.
Gotcha.
And he hit me on the left side of my left leg, threw me, and I landed, but I had a complete external tibial dislocation. Now, mind you.
That means bone is sticking through the skin, correct?
The bottom ball of the tibia was entirely outside the skin.
Jeez.
And, but the tibia did not break.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The fibula broke.
Gotcha.
And there was a lot of tendon damage that was done, but the tibia, the big bone, did not break. And which was
phenomenal considering the history of osteopenia.
Considering the 15-year history of osteopenia. So I did go back and have another bone density scan done during my recovery. And they were like, so what medication have you been taking? And
Gods.
right. I said, I've been taking raw milk and magnesium and a certain kind of magnesium. And they're like, and nothing else? And I was like, no, nothing else, just that. And they said, well, you have the bones of a healthy 18-year-old female.
Wow.
So,
At 48.
At 48.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you heard this, is this what started you? Because you were still practicing as a pharmacist this whole time.
Totally.
So at this point, when you realize, holy smokes, this is actually working, is this when you started to make the transition to?
No.
Okay.
No. After I went down the raw milk rabbit hole, and I came up for air, and I was like, so if the American Dairy Association is not necessarily
my friend,
our friend, then who else is also not our friend? And so then I started studying all kinds of other food, like food stories and what's the truth about food and that kind of thing. And at that time, then I found the Weston A. Price organization, which I don't know that
one. Uh-uh.
They really promote traditional eating and backed by science.
Okay.
That's what they do.
Okay.
And very, very, very good group. And they know exactly what they're talking about. And they have some of the best who regularly show up at their seminars and symposiums. But, and then I was hooked. I was like, oh my word. But then it's like when you have like, you're pointing a finger at somebody who's pointing back at you, got your three fingers pointing back at you. And it's like, well, okay, so if they've all been like not so truthful with us, then who else is lying? And I was like, I feel like I need to start looking at the pharmaceutical industry. And so this was, again, like after the raw milk, and I spent about 2 years raw milk and food. And then I just really kind of went down the rabbit hole of big pharma. I mean, I didn't realize what I was going to find. I had an idea, but it just, it just blew my mind. And I started out, I think the first drug class I really looked at was the statins.
Mm-hmm.
And which, again, this was probably 15 years ago, about 15 years ago.
Yep.
And I was like blown away with what we're told versus the reality.
And then the long-term effects.
Yep. And not just that, but statins, for example, which is one of the most popularly prescribed medications, right? It's like we need cholesterol.
Yep.
Cholesterol is not the fiend. Inflammation is the fiend.
Right.
But inflammation is never addressed, and not the way it should be. I mean, they'll come in and address inflammation if it's like you come in with a bad back, then you'll get your NSAIDs or your muscle spasm medication or whatever. Mm-hmm. But in terms of chronic inflammation, and from a lab work perspective, because I do lab work analysis and I'll look at people's labs and I'll make lab work recommendations, is they so often don't run even inflammation markers, because inflammation doesn't have to feel, like you don't have to feel anything, right? I mean, silent inflammation is what leads to heart disease. Right. Silent inflammation is what leads to brain disease, that kind of thing. And that can go on for years and years until the thing happens, whatever that thing is. But for heaven's sakes, our brains are 50% cholesterol.
Yeah.
Why would you take a medication?
What's the rationale behind them? Like what did you find? Why were they giving those out?
So for statins,
was it just a misunderstanding of what they were looking at?
I don't think there's a misunderstanding. Okay. I don't believe that there's a misunderstanding. I think that they've done the research and they know when you have inflammation vascularly, mm-hmm. you end up with little micro tears in the vascular system. Cholesterol, which is needed for every cell in the body, it's just doing its job at this point. It will go and start trying to patch these little tears. Gotcha. Like duct tape. And then when you have patch upon patch upon patch, because the tears keep happening, then that's when the clotting starts happening. Okay. And so you're looking at the effect, but not the cause. Yep. So that's the problem. And that's the problem in a lot of the pharmaceutical industry.
What's another medication outside of statins that you find the same thing, like a widely used one that it's either misunderstood or improperly used or whatever?
Acid reducers.
Okay, tell me about that. That's a big one.
That's a huge one. And up until a few years ago, there was no warning on it, and there's still, even though there is a warning on it, people are on them for decades. And they're not to be used for more than 8 weeks. So what happened?
Are they patching it over? Is that what the purpose of this thing is? Like, hey, I'm having some acid reflux stuff, so let's figure out a way to limit the amount of burning or whatever. Heart.
Okay, well, so this is where it gets very interesting too for this class of drugs, because people are taking them because they think they have too much acid?
Too much acid,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but the only way you can tell if you have too much acid is to actually do a procedure where they go and they take a little sample to see if that's the case. Right. How often is that getting done?
You tell me. I don't think very often. Yeah.
Like from the people I've talked to, like I don't know of anybody that's actually
they're doing
been
it based off symptoms.
They're doing it based off of symptoms. But here's the thing. In the reverse, if your body is not producing enough acid, stomach acid is what I mean. When the body's not producing enough stomach acid, you eat, the stomach has to digest all the food before it can go through the sphincter to go into the small intestine.
Yep.
If that can't happen, especially with meat, then you have like this roadkill situation that starts fermenting in your stomach. Where does it go?
Up.
It has no choice but to go up.
So you're saying a lot of times when we're prescribing, I don't prescribe, when physicians are prescribing these acid reflux medications or even just the over-counter stuff, we're trying to fix a symptom that's the root cause is actually the opposite. Like we actually need more acid, and these acid reduction medications are actually making the condition worse.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And
so what do you recommend? Because I see a lot of seniors that have GERD and those kind of issues. What should they be talking to their doctor about taking to help with that? What helps to improve?
High quality digestive enzymes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And if their food starts digesting, because as you get older, often your body's ability to produce their own digestive enzymes does go down.
Okay.
And so that's when...
Meaning, does that also mean that they're not getting as much nutrition from the food?
That's exactly right.
So there could be malnourishment just from this part too.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. And I have some older family members that's exactly what was happening until we got them on digestive
There's
enzymes.
lack of absorption of the nutrition that's been going through there. Okay.
But the other thing that happens with taking Protonics or Prevacid or whichever, pick your poison, there you have... Over time, it gets so bad that you're not absorbing anything. And so what happens, then your bones get brittle and then they see you because they've got a broken hip.
Yep.
Or so on and so on and so on.
Wow. So when you say digestive enzymes, so for the audience that's listening, where would they find, are those like probiotics? Is it, what exactly is that?
So probiotics and digestive enzymes are two completely different things.
Okay.
And probiotics are also very important. And I don't really want to talk brands here.
No, that's fine.
So, but
can you get? I guess my question is, can you get it from over the counter, like the digestive enzymes, or is it?
They're definitely available over the counter. Just use and I'm going to say use either a functional medicine practitioner or somebody who's more holistically minded that is willing to go down this path because they understand what I'm.
So as a brief aside for the folks that may not know what that means, what is a functional medicine doctor or practitioner compared to like internal medicine or primary care? So
a functional medicine doctor, and you can have an internal medicine doctor who specializes in functional medicine.
Okay.
But a functional medicine, they actually find the root cause as opposed to just dealing with symptoms.
Okay.
And the discouraging part of what a lot of people who are in healthcare see, people who like you and me, what we see is people who want to be healthy, but they don't want to take ownership of their own health. They just want somebody to give them a pill.
Yeah.
And so
or there's just so much information out there, they don't know how to make heads or tails of it, and so it's so overwhelming that
I totally agree. And then there's the people who they just don't know any better.
Right.
So there's that too. But I have had conversations with people, and I'm sure you have too, where you present the information and then they've heard the truth, they understand the truth, and it's easier to have the pill. So, but my point is, you will pay the pharmacist or you will pay the farmer.
Yeah.
One or the other, you're going to pay.
Right.
You're going to pay
somebody
one of
has
them.
far higher margins.
Yes.
Speaking of, there was a new drug. I don't know if you heard of this one. Apparently it's for, I just saw an article about it for diabetes. And they're starting to see this being prescribed as a weight loss drug. To your point, like everyone's looking for a pill. Holy smokes. Like a diabetic drug now being used for weight loss.
Yes. And I'm not a fan.
I would imagine so. That's got to do wonders for your insulin.
Not a fan.
Yeah.
And the other thing too that you have to remember is that particular medication is not inexpensive. And as soon as you stop, well, let's just say you can't stop. Right.
Because you're gonna reset your metabolism or your insulin sensitivity somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if you were to stop, it would not bode well. And so basically you're volunteering to be a diabetic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, you're volunteering to take diabetes medication.
Yeah.
And, some people may disagree with me, but I'm like, God gave us everything we need to manage our bodies, and he gave us what we need to heal.
Yes. And that goes to our point. We got a few minutes remaining. I wanted to show you a study that was done by Tufts. It's called not the food pyramid. It's called the, what do they call it? The food something.
Compass.
The food compass. Go ahead and pull that up, Jordan. So you see here, this was crazy. So this chart actually was not part of their study, but some people have actually taken some of the key points out of it to rank these foods. So there's a bunch of these going around on Twitter and the internet, whatever. So I just have one here that was really pretty phenomenal. It's got frosted mini wheats at a much higher health score than even something like a chicken breast or ground beef. And so when we're using these kind of studies to make recommendations for food, even in hospitals or whatever, it makes sense why a lot of the stuff that we're ingesting is hurting us, because the top stuff outside of maybe the watermelon and the kale, which there's some issues with kale too. Right. But outside of that, everything else there is like processed foods, and the things that are at the very bottom, ground beef and chicken is a little bit further up, but those things,
eggs.
Yes, they're considered as not as healthy. And so it's this kind of stuff that further makes it more difficult for people to make wise decisions. Because like, wait a minute, the powers that be, Tufts is a major university. And so they did this entire study. I think it was over like 3 or 4 years, if I remember correctly. And so if they're getting this information, it stands to wonder why people are so confused about even something as basic as nutrition.
And who funded these studies, Brian?
I know. Well, the people who make the top things in that chart. Yeah. So, and then the last one I'll show you too is there's a food pyramid that Tufts put out as well, that Jordan will pull up in just a second. There you go. And so on that one, it kind of goes through the same thing. And the bottom part's great. Hydration is good. Although at the bottom, if you read it, I know on the screen it'll be kind of tiny, but it talks about fruit juice. The problem with fruit juice is it's way high in sugar, and there's not enough fiber to make you feel full. And so you actually overdrink fruit drinks. But even that aside, the fact that we've got, was it 6? I think it's 6. I can't see it from the screen, but I think it's 6 servings of carbohydrates essentially for every 2 servings of protein. Well, one of the things that we recognize in healthcare, there's been recent studies, let me put it this way, it's not widely discussed. And so there was a recent study that was talking about sarcopenia, which is really just, it's age-related muscle loss. Mm-hmm. One of the issues with the recommended daily allowances is that the RDAs are not stratified by gender. They're not stratified by illness or health. They're not stratified by age. It's just a flat line of this is how much it takes of XYZ, whatever nutritional thing, to maintain like baseline living on a couch life. And so they recommend, I think it was if I remember correctly, I think it's 0.8 grams of protein per 1 kilogram of body weight for protein. And that was just, again, to maintain just a baseline thing. What the new research is showing is it actually needs 50% more than that. So 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight to help to bend the curve against sarcopenia. Interestingly enough, similar studies have shown that in the hospital, it's actually the 0.7. So even in the hospitals, they're not even getting like the baseline amount of protein. So this goes to like the whole industry needs to be better educated. Like the healthcare industry, the thing that you and I are in needs to be better educated on just the basics of nutrition, because if we don't have the ingestion stuff properly tuned for us, then it leads down these other pathways where now we feel like we're now having to go the pharmaceutical route, which obviously has some bad side effects to those as well.
Yeah, that's very true. And we can't blame the healthcare providers, because like those that don't know, that haven't gone down the rabbit holes.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just reflecting what they were taught.
Our training, that's right.
And our training. Yeah. But you have to remember, like, who was our training subsidized by? I mean, I can tell you from pharmacy school, I mean,
that's an obvious one.
Yeah, that's an obvious one.
Yeah.
So they're going to do what benefits them, right? And we as individuals, we are a commodity. Like our health is a commodity, and our health is if we are sick, we are way more of a commodity than if we are well and healthy and independent.
Oh, chronic illnesses are like that's right. Where the majority of the healthcare dollars are spent.
Right.
And those chronic illnesses are usually a reflection of poor eating habits.
That's exactly right.
And it's metabolic issues is really what's causing the majority of those.
Yeah, totally. So I totally understand the whole trickle down effect.
Oh yeah.
And I just,
what are some questions as we close up? What are some questions that seniors or even just active adults should be asking their doctors and their pharmacists about when it comes to these kind of things? Like, what do you usually educate your clients about?
Okay, well, and to be clear, I'm not behind the counter anymore.
Sure.
I use my license for in a different way. Yeah, I know.
I was going to say for good, but
you knew exactly what I almost came out of my mouth. But things like it is appalling to me to see a little old man or a little old lady. They come to the pharmacy and they're picking up their Boost or their Glucerna. I mean, that stuff is not good for you. Yeah. I mean, there are better alternatives out there, and the same thing can be said in terms of medication. When you get a bunch of doctors involved with a bunch of medications, no good will ever come of it. And every medication causes a deficiency. I mean, medication by definition is a toxin. I mean, it doesn't matter which medication it is a toxin.
It's not natural.
It's not natural.
Right.
But every medication will cause one or more or multiple deficiencies, like with the acid reducers, multiple deficiencies will cause a deficiency in a vitamin, a mineral, a hormone, an enzyme. I mean, and so that's
are all medications bad, or is there a use case for some in limited circumstances for a limited time frame? Taking antibiotics, for example.
Yeah, I mean, there's a time and a place for Western medicine. Don't get me wrong.
Okay. I just want to make sure the audience is clear. Yes, like, we're not anti-medication. Right, there's just, if we're utilizing that to manage chronic things, that might be, we might need to look at a different course.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in acute instances where we're dealing with like sepsis infection or whatever, the benefit of us having these medications now is we do live a lot longer.
Totally. But I will go so far as to say there is lifespan, and then there's health span.
Couldn't agree more.
So, and lifespan is, I mean, they can keep you alive for a very long time, but that doesn't mean that you're having any quality of life.
Right.
So health span is what I'm interested in, and I know that's what you're interested in too. And that's so that you can live life as full as you possibly can for, I'm going to say, the duration of your life. That you, at the end of your life, you go and say, that was a great ride.
Yes.
And you remember it.
That's kind of important. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, it was so great to have you on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing your information and education. What's the best way for our audience members to reach you?
I can be reached through my website, which is just www.goodmedicine.info.
And then all your stuff is on there, your contact information, how they can reach you, those kind of things. And you're based here in Dallas area?
In Dallas area. I'm north of McKinney.
North McKinney. Okay,
Yeah,
very
and
good.
I see clients via Zoom. I also see them in person. So
Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
very good. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Sure.
Liz.
Sure.
Great to have
Nice
you.
to meet you.
All right.